The coolant alarm cycled at a frequency that felt personal. Miremba pressed her thumb into the edge of her datapad and watched the amber warning light pulse in time with the noise. 40 minutes since the full drive had kicked like a wounded animal and died. The air still tasted of scorched insulation and recycled oxygen strained too thin. Her left hand ached from where she had landed on it, thumb bent back, the old nerve injury flaring white hot and then settling into something steadier. Pain focused her. It always had. Captain Winslow Baird stood at the damage control station with his sleeves rolled to the elbow. One hand braced against a console that was still warm from the surge. He had not looked at her since the alarm began. He looked at nothing but the readouts scrolling past his gray eyes, and he spoke to no one but the engineering channel. Ensign Gerlach sat at the sensor station with a medical patch dangling half-attached from his temple. Blood had dried in a jagged line down his cheek and into his collar. He had not complained. He had not spoken at all. "Captain," Miremba said, "the misfire. Was that the drive, or was something done to us?" Baird did not turn. "Gerlach, local space, now." The ensign's hands moved across his console. The coolant alarm cycled again. Miremba pressed her thumb harder against the datapad's edge and held still. She had learned, in 3 years with the diplomatic corps, that junior attachés did not demand answers from ship captains. They waited until the machinery of command had finished its work, and then they asked again. "Contact," Gerlach said. The word landed flat. No one moved. "Bearing," Baird said. "Bearing unclear, Captain. The contact is—" Gerlach stopped. He touched his console as though the readout might change if he pressed harder. "It's not on a vector. It's just there." "Explain." "No approach signature. No drive wake." Gerlach turned to face the captain, and the medical patch finally peeled free and fell into his lap. He did not notice. "Sir, this ship wasn't there before the misfire. The fold event must have masked its arrival, or ours." The coolant alarm stopped. The silence was worse. Baird crossed to the sensor station in 4 strides and looked at the readout over Gerlach's shoulder. What he saw there did not change his expression, but his jaw tightened once. "Define contact. Ship? Station?" "Ship," Gerlach said. "Small. Configuration unknown. It's hanging in the void like it was waiting for us." Like a splinter caught in a wound, Miremba thought. She did not say it. The image had arrived fully formed and unwelcome, and she pressed her thumb harder into the datapad's edge. A new sound filled the bridge. It came through the communication array in a chattering cascade of clicks, sharp and rapid, layered over a subsonic thrum that she felt in her sternum before she heard it with her ears. The noise repeated, paused, repeated again, with a variation in the rhythm. The ship's linguist, a woman named Tesfaye, who had not spoken since the misfire, straightened in her seat. "That's structured. That's not random noise." "Language?" Miremba said. Tesfaye nodded. "Patterned repetition with variation at regular intervals. They're saying something." Baird turned toward the communication station, and in that turn, Miremba saw her opening. She stood. The motion pulled at her injured hand, and she used the pain to sharpen her voice. "Captain, I should respond. This is first contact protocol. I'm the ranking diplomat on board." "You're a junior attaché." "I'm the only diplomat on board." The captain looked at her then. His eyes were a pale gray, and they gave away nothing. "And if they're hostile? Then my diplomatic credentials will not make the situation worse. Raising shields will." Baird's expression flickered. "I haven't raised shields." "You're about to." She had seen it in the set of his shoulders, in the way his weight had shifted toward the tactical station. She had seen that posture before, on the border world where she grew up, in the officers who had responded to a Selenith misunderstanding with weapons hot and questions later. The misunderstanding had erased a city. She still dreamed about the ash. "Captain," she said, and her voice was steadier than she felt. "We just tore a hole through space-time and appeared on their doorstep. If they were frightened by the arrival, raising shields will confirm every fear they might have about us. Let me answer them." Baird held her gaze for 3 full seconds. Then he turned to the tactical station. "Shields up. Weapons to standby." "No visible threat, Captain," Gerlach said. "They're just sitting there." "Shields up." That's an order. The hum of the shield grid rising through the deck plates felt like a door closing. Miremba sat down without meaning to. Her body had made the decision before her mind caught up, and she found herself back in her harness with her injured hand cradled in her lap and something cold and familiar settling into her ribcage. She had been here before. Not on this ship, not with these people, but in this moment. The machinery of human caution engaging before anyone asked whether it should. The good intentions of her diplomatic training colliding with the fixed reality of a captain's prerogative. The slow, helpless ache of watching an encounter escalate because the left hand could not stop the right. The alien ship went silent. The chattering clicks stopped mid-sequence. The subsonic thrum cut out so completely that the pressure change made her ears pop. The bridge held its breath. "Captain," Gerlach said quietly, "they've gone dark." "Incoming transmission?" Tesfaye said. "Visual." Baird's hand closed on the edge of his console. On screen, the main display flickered and resolved. The creature on the screen was feathered in storm gray and pale silver, with a crest of black plumage pressed flat against its skull. Its eyes were large and golden, set in a face that was not human, but was readable. Fear had flattened that crest. Fear had widened those eyes. One clawed hand hovered near a console off-screen, trembling in a way that Miremba recognized. It spoke. The words were halting, shaped by a mouth and throat never intended for human speech. Trade common, mangled but clear enough. "You tear the sky." The creature's crest pressed flatter still. "Explain this tearing." Miremba opened her mouth. The transmission cut. The screen went dark. The bridge lights flickered once, and then a new sound rolled through the deck plates. A single low-frequency pulse that made the metal hum for 2 full seconds and left a vibration in her teeth long after it ended. Gerlach was the first to speak. "What was that?" No one answered him. The pulse had not been a word. It had not been noise. It had felt like a door closing in a room much larger than the ship. Miremba sat very still with her thumb pressed to the datapad's edge and her injured hand aching, and the cold thing in her ribcage no longer familiar at all. She did not know what the pulse meant. Neither did anyone else on the bridge, and that was the only fact that mattered now. The wind choir had shifted 3 harmonics upward since the human ship arrived. Karis felt the change through the soles of his talons, a subtle vibration in the hollow bone ribs arching overhead. The Sky Talon's living hull still quivered with the memory of that energy spike. A wrong note caught in its resonant frame. Ozone clung to the air, sharp and foreign, cutting through the familiar musk of preening oil and nesting down. He stood alone at the resonance console and replayed the recording. The humans had not arrived. They had torn a hole. The fold point, a wound in space-time, had opened 17 diameters from any accepted lane. 17 diameters. A hatchling's error, not a ship's. The margin was so absurd that Kairos' flight muscles seized when the sensor log painted the location on the display. It was the kind of shame a fledgling would carry for life, shamed out of the nest by a warden's stare. And this species had done it with a ship. Worse, the rupture lay far too close to the nesting corridor, used by young pilots learning to ride the solar currents. He magnified the image. The human vessel lurched into real space, trailing a wake of radiation that peeled the outer atmosphere from a small moon. Debris scattered from its hull. Scorch marks, a gash along the ventral plating, a shield grid flickering staccato. The ship was wounded. It limped through local space, listing 3 degrees to port, and Kairos recognized the signs of a misfire he had seen only once before, on a Stormcry freighter whose full drive had nearly unspooled its crew across a light year. This was not an invasion. This was a ship in distress, carrying people who had no idea where they had landed. Alar's talon fall alerted him before the voice. The heavier tread of a nest sibling you grew up learning to avoid in a sour mood. Karis did not turn from the console. "I have watched it 5 times, Karis said. "They did not aim for the corridor. They did not know it was here. They violated a protected lane." Alar's voice carried the low, grinding tone that preceded a lecture. "Ignorance does not absolve a breach. The Prime Nest will see only the facts." Karis finally faced his senior Nest sibling. Alar stood rigid in the hatchway, his storm gray plumage flattened tight against his frame, in a posture that telegraphed displeasure to anyone with an eye for feather language. His crest lifted half a finger's width. Not a threat display yet. The precursor to one. They are limping, Karis said. Their hull is cracked open. That ship barely survived whatever brought it here. Conquerors do not arrive bleeding. Conquerors arrive in many conditions. Alar took 2 steps into the command hollow, the bone floor humming under his weight. Some arrive wounded and call for aid, and when the aid is given, they map every weakness. We will report the incursion as hostile. Karis preened his left primary feather. The motion was automatic, a grounding habit he had never trained out of himself. He ran his beak along the vein, smoothed the minute barb, and used the rhythm to slow his thoughts. Behind his ear, the feather settled back into place. "Let me try a second contact first," he said. The silence that followed was a living thing. The wind choir filled it with a low, mournful note. Alar's crest lifted to full height. The feather barbs separated, each one catching the amber light of the resonance console, and the threat was unmistakable now. A junior Wind Scout did not contradict a senior Nest sibling in front of the crew. The 4 unnamed crew members at the navigation stocks kept their gazes studiously on their tasks, their talons still as stone. "You suggest we open a channel to an unranked species that just tore a hole in our territory." Alar's words were clipped, each one a tiny, precise bite. "With what dialect? With what authority? With the trade fledgling protocol." Karis made his voice level. "The de-escalation dialect. The one we use with species who know nothing about us and cannot be expected to learn before they speak. They answered our first signal. Elar. They are trying. They are failing." Most species stop after a failed greeting. Kairos tilted his head, a gesture of mild rebellion that a Nest sibling would read. This one did not. He moved to the communication stock before Alar could object again. The crew member stationed there, a young feather named Terith, still molting the gray down of apprenticeship, slid aside without needing to be told. Karis isolated the frequency the humans had used in their response. It was a simple carrier wave, unencrypted, broadcast on a band so basic it almost embarrassed him. They were not hiding. He keyed the channel open with a 3-fingered touch across the resonance plate. "This is the Stormcry Syndicate Wind Scout Skytelin," he said, layering the words with the soft, rising cadence of the fledgling protocol. "We acknowledge your transmission. Please identify your vessel and intent. We offer trade calm." The response came faster than he expected, a female voice. It spoke in a language the ship's translator processed with a half-second delay, and the delay made the accent even stranger, stress landing on wrong syllables like a bird landing on weak branches. "This is the Stellar Concord diplomatic cutter Bright Horizon. I am Attaché Miremba Desta." The name was a cluster of sounds that Kairos' beak would never shape correctly. She paused, and he heard the faint hiss of recycled atmosphere, the shift of a body near a microphone. "We regret the intrusion. Our full drive malfunctioned. We require navigational data to avoid further disturbance." She fumbled the clicks in his name, the guttural stop where the wind tone should have been. It came out a garbled mess, but she kept talking. She did not pause when she hit the wrong consonant. She did not restart the greeting the way a dozen other species did when they mangled the phonemes. She just pushed through it, her voice carrying a tremor that might have been fear or exhaustion, or something else he could not identify through the flatness of the machine translation. Karis felt the air shift beside him. Alar stepped close enough for his wing to brush the console. The wing swipe cut the channel with a sharp, percussive snap across the resonance plate. The silence rushed back in, and with it the low, vibrating hum of the hull. "You conversed with an unranked alien," Alar said. "You gave it your voice print. It could be analyzed, replicated, used to breach our frequency locks. You have endangered the Syndicate's reputation for the sake of a thing that cannot pronounce your name." Karis preened his left primary again. The feather was perfectly smooth now. He kept smoothing it anyway. He did not answer. He let the silence fill the space where his argument should have been, because anything he said would become a weapon Alar could throw back at him in front of the crew. Alar's gaze swept the command hollow. "Purge the communication log. Every trace of that transmission. When we file our report with the Prime Nest, this conversation never happened." The order landed like a talon on a perch. Karis felt it through his whole frame. He gave the smallest dip of his crest, not agreement, just acknowledgement, and turned back to the console. Alar watched him for 3 breaths, then 4. Then he walked out, his talon falls fading down the resonant corridor toward the nesting bay. Kyrus opened the log. The entry glowed amber on the resonance plate, a single line of time-stamped data, and beneath it, the captured voice print. He stared at the option to delete. His flight muscles tightened. The wind choir sang a long, descending note that vibrated in his hollow bones. He did not delete the file. He moved it, folder by folder, into a navigational backup where operational logs never looked. The transfer took 6 seconds. When it finished, he closed the interface and stood with his talons spread wide on the bone floor, listening to the ship hum around him. Tareth glanced at him once, then looked away. The crew said nothing. The wind choir screamed. It was not the gentle, mournful note of before. This was a piercing, shattering tone that sent every feather on Kyrus's body lifting off his skin in the primal threat response. The resonance console flashed a deep, cold blue. A new contact had entered local space, a second Galeborn ship, its hull signature already etching itself into the display. Frost Hollow Syndicate. Kyrus read the incoming hailglyph before it finished forming. The ship was demanding immediate access to the human vessel. Not requesting, not asking for trade calm. Demanding. The inner field lock of the asteroid chamber was still cycling when Miremba heard Velath's terms through the comm relay. The Frost Hollow Trade Warden had arrived first, and he had already decided what this meeting would be. 1 human. Unarmed. The Mistwalker crystal will verify compliance. Captain Baird turned from the cutter's airlock monitor. His jaw was set in the particular way that meant he was working through tactical options and finding none he liked. Absolutely not. You're the only diplomat aboard. If this is an ambush, then 1 casualty is better than 4. Miremba was already pulling off her pressure jacket. The zipper snagged on her collar. She yanked it free with a sound like tearing fabric. The Mistwalker is here as observer. That crystal has more legal standing in 7 systems than either of our governments. They won't break protocol with it watching. You don't know that. I know that refusal means we leave with nothing. She handed him the folded pressure jacket. The recycled air of the cutter hit the bare skin of her arms, and she felt the first prickle of goose flesh. Under her undershirt, the trimmer in her left hand was already starting. She pressed her thumb hard against the edge of her datapad before setting it aside. Keep the channel open. If my vitals flatline, you have permission to be insufferably right about everything. Baird said nothing. That was worse than an objection. The field lock shimmered open. Miremba stepped through. The cold hit her first. Not the engineered cold of a climate-controlled ship, but the dry mineral cold of stone that had never known a sun. It seeped up through the soles of her boots and bit at her exposed forearms. The chamber was roughly circular, maybe 15 meters across. The walls raw asteroid rock left unsmoothed. 3 chemical lanterns sat on the floor in a loose triangle, their flames a pale amber that flickered more than they should. Low oxygen. Every breath felt a little too thin. Velath Rime Plume stood on the far side of the triangle. His plumage was frost blue, immaculate, and his crest was raised at a precisely calibrated angle. Not threat, not quite. Condescension with a thin layer of diplomatic tolerance. He wore a claw brace on his left wrist that clicked softly as he tapped 1 talon against it. 2 meters to his left, Kyrus Trailwind stood with his storm-gray crest half flattened in discomfort. His gaze tracked her as she entered, and she saw his head tilt, a fraction of a degree, unconscious, as if she were a specimen he could not quite classify. The Mistwalker crystal was mounted in a carry brace on the wall behind them. It pulsed a soft, steady blue. Waiting, Miremba stopped 3 paces inside the chamber. The field lock sealed behind her with a hiss that shivered up her spine. She did not rub her arms. She did not let her hand tremble. She squared her shoulders instead. Kyrus watched the human enter and felt his threat assessment fail in 3 separate ways. No claw, no crest, no visible carapace or quill ridge, just smooth brown skin stretched over a frame that looked like it would rupture under the lightest talon strike. She had shed her outer layer before entering, and the remaining garment was thin, functional, almost absurdly fragile. The cold was already drawing a network of tiny bumps across her exposed flesh. a species that could not even regulate its own thermal envelope without wrapping itself in dead fabric. And yet, she stopped walking at precisely the distance a dominant nest defender would choose, close enough to demand attention, far enough to react. Her eyes moved from Velath to Karis to the Mistwalker crystal and back, mapping the room in a single sweep. When her gaze settled on Velath, something in her posture changed. A stillness entered her, a weight. She had no threat display, so she made one from absence. His crest stirred against his will. "The terms," Velath began, and his voice was a dry rustle, "are simple. Your vessel is damaged. Your fold technology is clearly unstable. We will provide safe passage to the nearest neutral station. In exchange, your fold drive schematics. Full technical disclosure." The claw brace clicked. Clicked again. He was enjoying this. Miremba did not look at Baird's comm feed. She did not consult her datapad. She held Velath's pale eyes and said, "No." The syllable landed in the thin air and hung there. Velath's crest lifted a full degree. "You misunderstand the situation. You are crippled. You are alone. There is no rescue coming, and no leverage you possess that I cannot wait out. The schematics are not negotiable. They're not for sale." Her voice was steady. The tremor was in her left hand only, and her left hand was pressed flat against her thigh where no one could see. "But I'm not here to bargain. I'm here to offer." She took one step forward. The chemical lantern nearest her sputtered. A draft or something else. "Medical supplies. Repair assistance from our engineering crew. We'll patch your hull breaches if you have them and treat any wounded you're carrying. We ask nothing in return." The silence that followed was broken only by the click of Velath's claw brace. The tapping had stopped. Karis felt the shift in the chamber's pressure before his mind caught up to what she had said. Nothing in return. No terms. No contract. Among the Galeborn, a gift with no declared obligation was not generosity. It was a weapon. Debt. She was giving them a debt. He preened the single primary feather behind his left ear. A grounding gesture, rapid, half-conscious, and recalculated everything. This human had walked into a cold room on a dead rock, with no weapon and no leverage except her ship's distress. And she had just placed the Stormcry Syndicate's oldest legal principle on the table, like a stone. A debt unasked was a leash unspoken. If Velath accepted without terms, he would owe her. If he refused, he would have to explain to the Mistwalker observer why he turned away aid freely offered. His crest flattened, not in fear, in respect. Velath's beak parted to respond, and the Mistwalker crystal erupted in violent blue pulses. The pattern was unmistakable. Kairos had seen it once before in training simulations. Dimensional anomaly, proximity warning, imminent breach. The crystal was screaming in light. Behind them, 20 meters along the asteroid wall, the stone began to shimmer. The sound came first, a low, metallic groan, like a hull girder twisting just before it buckled. The chemical lanterns guttered in unison, their flames shrinking to blue ghosts as something pulled the air from the chamber. The shimmer spread outward in concentric ripples, and at its center, the rock was no longer rock. It was a membrane, a wound, a reality bridge, opening without authorization. Velath recoiled. His claw brace snapped up in a defensive arc, and his crest went rigid. The instinctive threat response of a Galeborn facing the impossible. "This chamber is shielded. No bridge can open here without." The groan deepened. Something on the other side pushed. Miremba did not run. Kairos saw her turn toward the distortion, not away, toward, and his threat assessment screamed wrong, 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 before he understood why. Her hand went to her belt and came up with a slim silver device he did not recognize. A scanner. She was trying to read what was coming through. The shimmer convulsed. The membrane bulged outward, and a limb pushed through. It was jointed in 3 places, each segment longer than a human arm, and it moved with a hydraulic slowness that suggested immense weight behind it. The surface was coated in iridescent fluid that dripped to the asteroid floor. Where the droplets landed, the stone smoked. Kairos felt his crest flatten so hard it pressed against his skull. He had no word for what he was seeing. No protocol. No trade precedent. The soft-skinned human was walking toward the wound with her scanner raised, and he could not move. Her voice cut through the metallic groaning. Calm, almost curious. Something's bleeding through the dimensional membrane. The fluid is corrosive. Don't let it touch you. She adjusted the scanner, squinted at the readout, and added, as if commenting on weather, "It's bigger than the aperture. Much bigger. The bridge is stretching to accommodate it." Valath made a sound in his throat, not words. The limb flexed. A fourth joint Kyrus had not seen before snapped into place with a crack like splitting stone, and the iridescent fluid sluiced off in sheets now, steaming where it pooled. The membrane stretched wider. The groan became a roar, and Miremba held her ground. Reading, measuring. A second limb began to push through beside the first. The thrum in the deck plates had shifted 17 minutes ago. Miremba felt it in her molars before she heard it. A low, grinding complaint that meant the backup thrust array was eating itself one bearing at a time. She stood at the auxiliary console on the Bright Horizons bridge, her injured hand pressed flat against the cold metal housing for the pain, and watched the long-range plotter paint a nightmare. The dimensional instability was spreading faster than the ship could limp. Captain Baird hunched over the primary navigation display. His face, lit from below by the amber glow of failing systems, looked 10 years older than it had on the asteroid. "Gerlach, give me a rate." Inside, Gerlach did not look up from his station. Dried blood still crusted his hairline from the full-drive misfire. 12,000 kilometers per second expansion. It'll overrun us in 41 minutes at current thrust. And if we push the thrusters past rated tolerance, 31 minutes before we lose the array entirely, then we drift. Baird said nothing. The dimmed bridge lights carved long shadows across his jaw. Miremba turned toward the rear of the bridge, where Kyrus Trailwind crouched on a cargo crate dragged in from the corridor. The Galeborn's storm-gray plumage looked wrong in the low light. Flattened, dulled. A plasma burn ran from his left shoulder to the joint of his wing, the feathers blackened and brittle. Gerlach had wrapped the wound in a human burn dressing, but the smell leaking through was chalky and strange, a sweetness that did not belong in a wound. "The entity," Miremba said. "It came through the bridge before we sealed the asteroid chamber." Karis preened a single scorched feather behind his ear. The gesture looked compulsive, grounding. "We call them no-win remnants, old things. They hunt by following bridge signatures. A ship vanishes. A station goes silent. The stories say they cannot be killed." He paused, crest flattening. "Only outrun." "The database confirms it," Gerlach said. "The Selenith filed a report 400 years ago. They called it a temporal predator, something that exists outside linear time and feeds on dimensional stress. The report ends mid-sentence. "How many ships did the Selenith lose?" Baird asked. "The report doesn't say," Gerlach muttered. "The author probably didn't survive long enough to count." The bridge went silent. The thrust array groaned. Miremba pulled up the asteroid chamber telemetry on her console. The reality bridge projector, Valath's device, the spiral driftwood talon humming with trapped static, was still active, still stitching 2 points of spacetime together in a frozen cave 30,000 kilometers astern. The dimensional bleed was pouring out of it like smoke from a wound. "We closed the bridge," she said. "That stops the bleed. The remnant loses its scent trail." Baird straightened. "The projector is Frost Hollow property. Valath made that clear before he evacuated the asteroid. Then we convince him to shut it down remotely." "He won't." Karis's voice was thin. The burn dressing rustled as he shifted his weight. "The projector is proprietary. If he triggers a destruct sequence from here, he admits the technology failed. Frost Hollow does not admit failure. He would rather lose the system." Miremba's thumb found the edge of her datapad. She pressed until the groove cut deep. "Then we need another way to collapse the rift," she said. Karis was quiet for a long moment. His talons clicked against the metal crate. "There is a second projector." Baird turned. "Where?" "A hidden research platform. Stormcry Intelligence identified it 30 cycles ago. Frost Hollow built it inside a gas giant's upper atmosphere in the 16th orbital band. The location is supposed to be secret." He preened the scorched feather again. The motion was tighter now. Angry. "Velath's syndicate uses it for high-energy dimensional tests, far from their trade routes, far from witnesses." "Can it collapse the rift?" Miremba asked. "From that distance?" Karis flared his crest, then flattened it. Yes. If the projector is tuned to the same bridge signature, the resonance would cancel the bleed. But Velath would never authorize it. Giving away the platform's location is a loss of face. Using it cooperatively with humans and Stormcry, he will call it nest mixing, the worst possible contamination. Miremba looked at the plotter. The instability was a red stain spreading across the display. 41 minutes. Less now. Open a channel to Velath's ship, she said. Baird raised an eyebrow. He cut contact when we pulled Karis aboard. Then he'll be surprised to hear from me. The channel opened with a crackle of Frost Hollow encryption. Velath Rhineplume's image resolved on the main display. Frost blue plumage, crest half raised in permanent condescension. Claw brace tapping against his wrist in a rhythm that Miremba now recognized as genuine agitation. You have my Wind Scout, Velath said. No greeting, no preamble. I have your Wind Scout because your projector swallowed his ship, Miremba replied. He's injured. He's alive. And he just told us about your research platform. The claw brace stopped tapping. The platform is a syndicate secret, Velath said. Stormcry's spies have bought themselves a blood debt. The blood debt can wait. The dimensional instability cannot. Miremba stepped closer to the display. The bridge lights carved her face into planes of shadow and amber. Here is what I am proposing. Human ships and Stormcry vessels will form a defensive screen around your platform. While we hold off the remnant, or distract it, or buy time however we can, your people use the second projector to collapse the rift from a safe distance. The bleed stops. The remnant loses its trail. Everyone survives. Velath's crest lifted fully. The feathers trembled with something that was not quite anger. You want Frost Hollow to accept military protection from humans and a rival syndicate? You want us to expose our most valuable research asset to outsiders? You want us to trust that neither party will exploit the opportunity to seize our technology? I want you to have a way to save your people without losing your face, Miremba said. The words landed. Velath's crest dropped half an inch. This is nest mixing, he said. But the condemnation sounded reflexive now. Hollow. This is three factions facing extinction, Miremba said. The remnant does not care about syndicate purity. It does not care about trade contracts or proprietary technology or blood debts. It is hungry, and it is faster than all of us. And the only chance we have is to do something your people consider impossible. Velath stared at her through the display. The claw brace started tapping again. 2 beats, then silence. The answer is no. The channel cut. The bridge filled with the sound of the thrust array grinding through another bearing. Gerlach swore under his breath and turned back to his console. Baird ran a hand over his jaw and looked at Miremba with an expression she could not read in the dim light. From the cargo crate, a new light pulsed. The Mistwalker crystal, lumen phase shift, the observer cradled in its crystalline lattice, flickered a sequence of pale blue pulses. The ship's translation matrix rendered the light dialect into text on Miremba's datapad a half-second later. Why do you offer your own resources to defend a rival who refused you? Miremba did not look at the crystal. Her eyes stayed on the dark display where Velath's image had been. Because he won't let his people die. He just needs a way to save face. The Mistwalker pulsed again. A single query flash. The translation read, "This is a prediction or a gamble?" "Both," Miremba said. Baird stepped toward her. The captain's voice was low, meant only for her. "How do you know he'll cooperate?" Miremba finally turned. Her injured hand had stopped trembling. She hadn't noticed when. "I don't know. I'm betting that his pride is smaller than his nest." The bridge went quiet. The thrust array groaned. Someone's breath caught. Gerlach's maybe. And then Baird nodded. Once. A small motion, but final. "Gerlach," Baird said. "Get me a firing solution for the plasma lance. If we're going to play bait for a temporal predator, I want to at least annoy it." Gerlach's hands were already moving across his console. Working. Karis rose from the cargo crate. The motion cost him. His burned wings sagged, and the chalky sweetness of scorched feather filled the air. "Stormcry will commit vessels. My Aerie will follow my word." "Will the other syndicates?" Miremba asked. "No. They will wait to see who survives." Karis met her eyes. His crest was flat, but his gaze was steady. "We are not like humans. We do not build coalitions across old fault lines. This is new for us. It's new for us too, Miremba said. We just pretend it isn't. The comm panel lit up. Every head on the bridge turned. The incoming signal was encrypted. Frost Hollow Protocol, the handshake unmistakable. But the seal attached to the transmission was not a syndicate seal. It was a personal seal. Valath's private cipher. Baird stared at the blinking indicator. Is that what I think it is? Miremba reached for the channel control. Her thumb left a small smear of blood on the metal from where the datapad edge had broken skin. Open it, she said. Wind screamed through the resonance cavities of the Stormcry primary platform, a sound that rose and fell like something vast and wounded. Inside the sealed negotiation chamber, the air was warm and thick with the smell of nesting moss. Karish Trailwind stood before the matron captain with his crest half lifted in formal deference, and his spine rigid with barely contained terror. He had never asked his syndicate for anything this large. Matron captain, he began. The old Galeborn's black crest flattened in something not yet refusal, but certainly not encouragement. Her plumage was iron gray, frayed at the edges from 70 cycles of leading Stormcry through trade wars and resource famines. She perched on the speaking ledge with both talons locked around the carved bone of her authority staff. The human ship is dying. The reality bridge Frost Hollow deployed has destabilized. The rift is spawning temporal remnants. One of them, a no-win fragment, will reach our nesting corridor in less than 40 minutes. I have read your report, Wind Scout. Her voice was dry as shed cuticle. Frost Hollow's projector. Frost Hollow's catastrophe. Why should Stormcry ships form a shield wall with strangers who cannot steer their own vessel? Karis preened the primary feather behind his left ear. Once, twice. A grounding gesture. He had rehearsed 3 arguments, each one carefully layered with trade logic and syndicate advantage. None of them came to his beak. Before he could find the words, Miremba spoke. She had been standing near the chamber's moss wall, so still and quiet, the matron captain's 2 sentinels had stopped tracking her. Her face was gray with exhaustion. Her voice came raw as torn fabric. She stepped forward, and the Galeborn watched her move. That strange mammalian gait, no crest to read, no plumage to signal intent. Nothing but a body walking into the center of a room full of predators. The Bright Horizon's full drive misfired, she said. We came out of the jump 17 diameters too close to your nesting corridor. We didn't mean to. We didn't plan it. We broke something, and now it's spreading. She stopped 3 body lengths from the matron captain's ledge. Her left hand trembled, pressed flat against her thigh. I can't ask you to trust my species. I can only tell you that we caused this. We will stand in the most vulnerable position of the shield wall to contain it. The silence became a physical thing. Karis felt his own crest shift without permission, a fractional lift of shock he could not suppress. Around him, the other Galeborn showed the same involuntary response. A junior trade scribe near the back of the chamber let out a soft, confused chitter, mortifying under any other circumstances. No Galeborn syndicate admitted fault publicly. Not to rivals, not to partners, not ever. Fault was a vulnerability exploited in the next contract cycle, a weakness that reshaped the balance of power for decades. You buried fault. You obfuscated it. You paid wardens to erase the evidence and negotiators to redirect the blame. You did not walk into the center of a negotiation chamber and lay it down like a gift. The matron captain stared at Miremba with an expression Karis had never seen on her face before. Her crest froze at a halfway angle, the visual equivalent of a sentence cut short. Her talons loosened on the bone staff. You would place your vessel at the front of the formation, she said slowly, where the first impact will land. Yes, your ship is already damaged. Yes, you will likely be destroyed. Miremba's thumb pressed into the edge of her datapad. If the shield wall fails, we're all destroyed anyway. At least this way, we're the first ones to find out. The matron captain opened her beak, and the chamber's outer hatch signal cut through the air like a blade. The hatch irised open. Valath Rhymeplume entered the chamber with his crest fully lowered. Karis felt his plumage shift again, a full-body ripple he could not have controlled if his life depended on it. The sight was wrong. Impossible. Valath Rhymeplume, senior trade warden of Frost Hollow, the syndicate that had spent 4 centuries building its reputation on unyielding contractual purity, was walking into a Stormcry chamber with his crest feathers lying flat against his skull. The frost blue plumage, normally bristling with condescension, now lay smooth, almost soft, against the curve of his head. The gesture of a debtor. The posture of someone who owed more than wealth could pay. 2 wardens flanked him, their own crests low but watchful. They fanned out behind him as he stopped before the matron captain's ledge. Frost Hollow will contribute the second projector, Velath said. His voice was clipped, each word placed like a coin on a counting table. We will match the human position at the shield wall's forward anchor. The resonance cancellation requires both projectors to fire simultaneously. We are the only syndicate that knows the firing sequence. He paused. His claw brace clicked once. Stormcry must guarantee the projector's safety during transit and deployment. In return, Frost Hollow will forgive the nesting corridor incursion and extend trade rights to Stormcry vessels for the next 40 cycles. The matron captain stared at him. Then she laughed. It was a rapid, clattering sound, beak clicking against beak, the Galeborn equivalent of helpless disbelief given voice. The sentinels shifted uneasily. The trade scribe had stopped breathing. 40 cycles, she said, when she could speak again. You offer 40 cycles of trade rights, and you expect me to believe this is not some Frost Hollow trap? I am standing in your chamber with my crest down, Velath said flatly. If I intended a trap, I would be on my ship with the hatch sealed. You would be, wouldn't you? The matron captain's crest lifted slightly. It settled again. She looked at Miremba, then at Velath, then back at Miremba, as though checking if the two of them were somehow the same creature in different skins. The humans have infected both syndicates with insanity. You know this. I am aware, Velath said. And you want me to join you. I want you to guarantee the projector's safety. The joining is incidental. Nothing you do is incidental, Rhyme Plume. You count the seeds in every fruit before you eat it. She tapped a talon against her authority staff. The sound echoed off the moss-lined walls. Fine. Stormcry will commit 3 Wind Scout vessels to the shield wall. We will take the rear anchor position. If the humans break and flee, we will be the last ones in the path of whatever comes through. Karis felt something loosen in his chest, a knot he had been carrying since the moment the bright horizon tore through the fold and into his life. We won't break, Miremba said. The matron captain fixed her with a look. You are a species that admits fault in public. I have no idea what you will do next. That is why I am agreeing. Velath's crest stayed low. Something flickered across his face, a muscle movement around the beak Kairos could not quite read. He turned to Miremba. The frost blue plumage rippled once before settling. The firing sequence requires synchronization to within 1/10 of a wing beat, he said. Can your vessel manage that? Our navigations officer can manage it, Miremba said. He has a concussion and 12 stitches in his scalp. He'll still hit the mark. Velath's claw brace clicked. I want to meet him. Then come to the ship. The wardens exchanged a glance Kairos could read perfectly. The silent, horrified calculation of what it would mean for a senior trade warden to set foot on a crippled alien vessel. Velath ignored them. 1 hour, he said. We deploy when both projectors are powered and the resonance frequency is locked. If the synchronization fails by more than 1/10 of a wing beat, the cancellation will not hold. The rift will widen instead of closing. I understand, Miremba said. No, you do not. Velath's voice dropped to something quieter, almost private. If the rift widens, the no-win remnant will not simply pass through. It will anchor. It will breed. Your species, our species, the Mistwalkers, the Selenith. Every sentient life form in this sector will become prey to something existing outside of linear time. There will be no war to win. There will only be an endless moment of being eaten. The chamber grew very quiet. The wind screamed outside the resonance cavities, a wailing counterpoint to the silence within. Miremba looked at Velath for a long moment. She looked at the matron captain, then at Karis. Then we'd better not miss, she said. Above her, near the ceiling, the Mistwalker crystal pulsed a soft blue light. Lumen phase shift had been hovering there throughout the negotiation, utterly silent. A sentient gas cloud smaller than a human fist contained in its crystalline lattice. It had witnessed everything. It had watched a human admit fault. It had watched a Galeborn trade warden lower his crest. It had watched 3 species, 4, if you counted the Mistwalkers themselves, assemble something with no precedent in the diplomatic records of any known civilization. The light pulse came again, more insistent this time. A question, directed at Miremba. Tesfaye's translation suite, still running on the datapad clipped to her belt, rendered it in a soft, synthetic voice. Your species does this often? Miremba hesitated. Her thumb found the edge of her datapad. Karis watched her thumb move, pressing into the groove worn by years of the same gesture. He had noticed it before, in the asteroid chamber, when she stood unarmed in the cold and refused to bargain. He had thought it was fear. He was starting to understand it was something else entirely. I don't know, she said. We've never met anyone else before. The Mistwalker's light flickered, a rapid, stuttering pattern the translation suite did not attempt to render. Kairos did not need a translation. He had seen that pattern before in the command hollow of the Sky Talon, when his own wind choir had shifted 3 harmonics after the human ship's arrival. It was the Mistwalker equivalent of laughter. And then the proximity alarm triggered. The sound came as a low, deep thrum vibrating through the platform's living struts, felt in the talons before it registered in the ears. Karis knew it instantly. Every Wind Scout did. It was the warning from the outer sensor array, the one monitoring the rift's expanding perimeter. He turned toward the speaking ledge. The matron captain was already moving, her authority staff clattering as she pushed herself upright. Report, she snapped. A voice crackled through the chamber's communication hollow. One of the sensor watchkeepers, his whistle tone sharp with alarm. Matron Captain, the rift has spawned another remnant. Smaller than the first, but moving faster. Trajectory suggests it will intercept the platform in 17 minutes. The room went cold. Kairos felt his plumage flatten against his body, an involuntary response to a threat he could not see and did not know how to fight. 17 minutes. The shield wall deployment needed at least 30. Valath's crest, still lowered in its debtor's posture, trembled once. A micro-movement anyone who did not know him would have missed. Karis saw it. Miremba was already reaching for her datapad, her thumb still pressed against the groove. Her tremor was stilled by the same weight it always was. Where's the second projector? She asked. The rift opened without sound. Miremba felt it first as a pressure change in her sinuses, a wrongness that made her injured hand spasm against the command rail. On the main display, a wound of purple-green light split the dark between the Frost Hollow platform and the shield wall. The color hurt to look at, bruised and gangrenous, seeping into the visible spectrum from somewhere that had no business touching real space. 3 contacts. Garlock's voice came tight over the bridge channel. Emergence pattern matches the first incursion. They are larger. They were. Elongated shapes of liquid silver pushed through the rift like mercury poured into water. They did not accelerate. They did not maneuver. They simply moved, and the movement was wrong. A reflection of something not yet present, sliding along trajectories that seemed to arrive before they departed. Baird's jaw worked once. Shield wall, hold formation, weapons free on my mark. The matron captain's voice answered from the Stormcry command ship, translated into flat standard by the diplomatic channel. We see them. Gale honor to the wall. Gale honor? Miremba repeated. She did not know if she meant it. She pressed her thumb into the datapad's edge and felt the familiar groove. The remnants drifted toward the platform, toward the active projector. The first plasma lance fired, a Stormcry cruiser, too eager, too far forward. The bolt struck the nearest remnant across what should have been its midline. The silver surface rippled. The remnant did not slow. Short range, Baird muttered. We have to let them close. The effective range of a plasma lance was terrible. Miremba had read the specifications. 400 meters against stationary targets, less than half that against anything moving. The shield wall had to hold at knife fight distance, hull to hull, within the envelope where the remnants could reach back. The eager Stormcry cruiser drifted forward another 20 meters. Correcting. Overcorrecting. The remnant reached. There was no impact, no explosion. The cruiser simply began to come apart, plating peeling away in slow spirals, atmosphere crystallizing into a glittering mist. The remnants pulled it open like something curious, something mindless. something that did not understand what it was destroying and could not be made to care. The cruiser's transponder died. Karis watched from the command hollow of the Talon's Mercy. His crest was flat against his skull. His talons worked the comstock with a rhythm he did not recognize as his own. The formation is too loose. He was speaking before he knew he was speaking, the words tumbling out of him in the trade-fledgling protocol his Aerie had mocked him for learning. They are exploiting the gaps. Tighten the wall. 3-ship overlap. The matron captain's response came after a pause that lasted too long. That is not our doctrine. Doctrine is for enemies that die. Another pause. Then, pattern shift. 3-ship overlap. Transmit the correction. Karis's talons flew across the comstock. Coordinates. Velocities. A new geometry that pulled the surviving ships closer together, lance coverage overlapping in the spaces between hulls. The wall tightened. On the bright horizon, Baird saw the correction arrive and did not hesitate. Helm. Match the pattern. Gerlach, feed the new coordinates to tactical. His hands were already moving. Miremba watched him trust an alien transmission without verification, without deliberation, because there was no time for either. The line held. The first remnant drifted into the kill zone, and 3 lances struck it simultaneously from overlapping angles. The silver surface tore. The remnant thrashed, a motion that did not belong in 3 dimensions, and then it came apart, evaporating into a fine gray dust that hung motionless in the void. One down, Gerlach said. His voice cracked on the second word. The platform was screaming. Valath Rime Plume had begun the bridge collapse sequence. The projector, the spiral driftwood talon humming with trapped static, was feeding its resonance into a counter-pulse, unstitching the wound from the far side. The second projector, the hidden unit buried in the gas giant's atmosphere, answered with a frequency that made Miremba's teeth ache. The sound came through the hull, a descending metallic wail, the dimension's death cry. The 2 remaining remnants paused, dumbfounded, confused, their trajectories stuttered. The signal is disrupting them, Kairos transmitted. Valath, continue the sequence. Do not. One remnant broke off. It accelerated toward the bright horizon. Evasive. Baird's hand slammed the helm console. No. Miremba's voice cut through the bridge. Quiet. Still. Hold position. Attaché? If we break formation, the wall opens. You have seen what happens when the wall opens. She was not looking at him. She was looking at the display, at the silver shape growing larger. Gerlach, the memory extractor. The ensign turned. The dried blood in his hair looked black in the dim bridge lighting. Ma'am? Set it to broadcast. Platform location. On loop. She still did not look at him. The remnants are drawn to active projector signatures. If we give them a stronger one, we do not have a projector. We have a brain. The extractor can pull an image of the platform's location, a memory of coordinates, a decoy made of stolen signal. Gerlach was silent. It will burn the memory. Miremba's thumb pressed deeper into the datapad. The extraction is destructive. You will lose it permanently. I do not know what else it will take. The remnant was 30 seconds out. The metallic wail from the platform climbed toward a shriek. Do it, Gerlach said. She did not look at him. The extractor loom was in the medical bay. Gerlach's hands moved across the console, routing the broadcast through the communications array, setting the loop duration to continuous. The silver needle suspended in gel began to glow. The smell of ozone and scorched hair filled the bridge. The remnant veered. It turned away from the bright horizon with a liquid, boneless motion, following the broadcast signal toward empty space, toward nothing, toward a ghost image of the platform pulled from a young man's skull. The metallic wail peaked, broke, fell silent. The dimensional rift collapsed. The purple-green light folded inward, smaller and smaller, until it was a point, a speck, nothing. The last remnant evaporated mid-strike. One moment it was there, silver and terrible. The next, gone. The bridge was quiet. The extractor whirred and then stopped. Miremba's injured hand was shaking badly. She did not try to still it. She did not look at Gerlach. Her face was wet. She did not make a sound. On the Talon's Mercy, Kairos watched the tactical display clear. No contacts. No anomalies. No dimensional bleed. The shield wall ships were beginning to break formation, slowly, as if they did not quite believe what they were seeing. His crest rose and fell in a rhythm his airy mates would have called laughing and would have been wrong about. His preening feather was a ragged mess. He could not remember when he had started pulling at it. Vilath's voice came through the open channel. Not the diplomatic band this time. The wide-frequency one. The one every ship in the formation could hear. The rift is closed. The platform is intact. A pause. Frost blue plumage would be half-raised now, Kyrus knew. The condescension fighting with something heavier. I owe a debt. The pause stretched. Kyrus could hear the old trade warden's claw brace clicking against his wrist. I do not know how to repay it. Kyrus understood, in that moment, that Velath was not speaking to the formation. He was not speaking to the matron captain, or to Baird, or to the surviving crews of the shield wall. He was speaking to Miremba alone. The heater hummed. A small sound, a domestic sound, utterly alien in this chamber of raw rock and chemical lanterns. Someone had placed it in the center of the carved floor, a compact human device, orange filament visible through its grill. Miremba watched the filament pulse and dim, cycling to maintain temperature against the asteroid's mineral cold. Her hands rested in her lap, both of them. Still, the memory extractor loom sat against the far wall, a web of silver needles suspended in gel, its power indicator dark. No one had touched it. No one would touch it now. It stayed in the room because someone had forgotten to remove it, or because no one wanted to be the first to suggest it should go. That fact said more about the last 5 hours than any formal treaty could. The Lathrime plume stood near the central lantern. His frost blue plumage was disheveled, the keratin sheen dulled by stress and exhaustion. His crest rode at half-mast. The claw brace on his wrist was still. He had not tapped it once since the dimensional collapse completed. Frost Hollow will open trade negotiations with the Stellar Concord, he said. The words came out flat, as if he were reading from a contract not yet drafted. The terms will be favorable to both parties. Miremba waited. Velath turned to Karish Trailwind. His crest flickered, the barest twitch of muscle, and stilled. I thank Karis of Stormcry for facilitating contact between our syndicate and the human delegation. Without his intervention, this outcome would not have been possible. Karis stood at Miremba's right shoulder. He had been there for 12 minutes now, ever since the last of the dimensional echoes faded and the assembled Galeborn began the long, silent work of tallying their losses. He had not announced his placement. He had walked to her side and stopped. His storm gray plumage was still flecked with dust from the collapsing bridge. He stood there. He accepted Velath's thanks with a single downward tilt of his head. No posturing, no crest flare of triumph, just the tilt. Then stillness. Stormcry acknowledges the debt cycle between our syndicates, Karis said. It is now closed. Velath's crest rose a centimeter, settled again. He was being released from obligation. Everyone in the room knew it. The release had been offered without spectacle. That was the part the Galeborn would remember later. Not the battle, not the dimensional collapse, but the moment Karish Trailwind held leverage over a rival syndicate and let it dissolve into nothing. The matron captain's holographic form shimmered into view near the chamber's entrance. Projected from a comm relay someone had hauled in on a float sled. The image crackled with interference from the asteroid's mineral content. Her severe bronze and slate plumage reduced to a wash of color and light. Stormcry will sponsor a joint research station, she said without preamble. Dimensional fold safety, bridge containment protocols, the physics that nearly killed us all. She paused. The hologram's eyes swept the chamber. Miremba felt the weight of that gaze even through the distortion. We will offer the Stellar Concord co-leadership of this station. The humans have earned it. Miremba stood. Her knees ached from the cold. Her injured hand throbbed faintly, a reminder that the tremor was only stilled, not gone. She stood without bracing herself. The Stellar Concord accepts co-leadership, she said. We will contribute personnel, data, and funding equivalent to Stormcry's commitment. I am authorized to make this agreement binding pending formal ratification. She was not authorized. Captain Baird would back her up. The diplomatic corps would sort out the paperwork later. She was not authorized. The matron captain probably knew it. The hologram's crest rippled once. Miremba could not tell if the gesture meant amusement or approval. Binding pending ratification, the matron captain repeated. We have a term for that. Nest pledge. A promise made before the flock, enforceable by honor, if not yet by law. The hologram flickered. Stormcry accepts your nest pledge, Miremba of the Stellar Concord. The connection ended. The hologram collapsed into a brief scatter of light. The chamber was dim again, lit only by the chemical lanterns and the orange pulse of the heater. From the corner of the room, lumen phase shift emitted a sequence of light pulses. The Mistwalker's crystalline containment lattice sat on a carved stone shelf, its internal gas cloud shifting from violet to pale gold. The translator in Miremba's earpiece rendered the pulses as words a half-second later. The Mistwalkers will observe further. This behavior is not in our predictive models. Miremba laughed, a single soft exhalation, barely more than a breath. The crystal's light pulses stopped mid-sequence. The gas cloud froze in its lattice like a swirl of captured smoke. Lumen phase shift was confused. The translator offered no equivalent for the confusion, but Miremba could see it in the way the light refused to resolve into a stable color. I'm sorry, she said. That was not directed at you. She stopped. How did you explain laughter to a sentient gas cloud? How did you explain that sometimes the only appropriate response to the universe was a sound meaning nothing and everything at once? I was expressing relief and exhaustion, and something else I do not have a word for in your language. The gas cloud shifted from gold to a tentative blue. The translator offered no interpretation. Lumen phase shift was, presumably, thinking. Kyrus turned his head, his crest angling down toward her. The motion brought a faint scent of nesting moss, a dry and green smell clinging to his feathers. You are unharmed? I am unharmed. She looked at her hands again. I am unharmed. The dimensional rift is closed. We are still alive. All of us. Most of us. The crew of the Stormcry cruiser. She did not know their names. She would learn their names. That seems like more luck than any one person deserves. Luck is a word humans use when they do not wish to claim responsibility for their choices. Karis preened the single primary feather behind his left ear. The gesture was slower than before. Less a nervous habit now, more a ritual of grounding. You held position when the remnant bore down on your ship. That was not luck. No, she said. It was not. What will you do next? The question caught her off guard. She had expected something formal, a closing statement, a diplomatic pleasantry to mark the end of the crisis. Not this quiet, curious thing Kyrus asked, as if he genuinely wanted to know. I will return home, she said. I will file a report. There will be hearings, debriefings. The Concord will want to understand what happened here before they ratify anything. And then, she looked at her tremor-stilled hands. The left one was entirely calm now. The fingers relaxed against her thigh. No groove from the datapad's edge pressed into the skin of her thumb. She had not reached for the datapad in over an hour. Then I'll find the next group of people who think cooperation is weakness, she said. And I will show them what we built here. Karis tilted his head. His nictitating membrane swept across his eye and retracted. You speak as if there will always be another group. There will always be another group. You are certain of this? I am certain. She let her gaze drift across the chamber, to Valath, speaking in low tones with one of his trade wardens, to the powered-down memory extractor, to the heater still humming, still pulsing its tiny orange heart against the cold. Humanity has been doing this for a very long time, finding people who cannot imagine trusting one another, showing them that it is possible. The Mistwalker said our behavior is not in their predictive models. She turned back to Kyrus. It will be, eventually. The crystal on its shelf pulsed a querying violet. Lumen phase shift had been listening, or the Mistwalker equivalent of listening, its gas cloud roiling slowly within the lattice. Captain Baird crossed the chamber toward her. His uniform was rumpled. A fresh burn marked his left forearm where a conduit had blown during the final bridge collapse. He had refused treatment until the wounded from the Stormcry cruiser were seen to first. Miremba had watched him say the words to the Bright Horizons medic, calm and immovable, and she had thought, this is why he is a captain, and not because he gives orders well. Miremba. He stopped a pace away. his hands clasped behind his back. A word. She stepped aside with him, out of the heater's direct radius. The cold reasserted itself immediately, seeping through the soles of her boots. When we get back to Concord space, Baird said, there will be a promotion waiting for you. That is not a prediction. That is a fact. What you did here, the shield wall, the offer to place the bright horizon in the sacrificial position, the co-leadership acceptance without waiting for authorization, that'll make you one of the youngest senior attachés in the diplomatic corps. I know, she said. You will hate the politics that come with it. He was not asking. He was stating a fact, the same way he stated coordinates for a fold jump. The hearings, the review boards, the people trying to claim credit for what you did because they were in the same room when it happened. You will hate all of it. I know. She met his eyes. I'll do it anyway. Baird shook his head. He was smiling, a tired smile, the smile of a captain long enough in command to recognize the look on a junior officer's face when they decided to carry something heavier than they should have to carry. You remind me of someone I used to know. She was also too stubborn to quit and too honest to let someone else take the fall for her. What happened to her? She's still out there, Baird said, running a humanitarian outpost on a border world. Happy, she tells me. Tired, but happy. He paused. You should sleep. Both of you. The negotiations can resume in 6 hours. He turned and walked back toward the chamber's exit. Ensign Gerlach waited there with a portable medkit and a look of long-suffering patience. Miremba watched the captain go. Then she returned to Kyrus's side. Kyrus had not moved. He still stood exactly where she had left him, a deliberate sentinel of storm-gray plumage and quiet attention. When she stopped beside him, he did something with his wing. A small adjustment, a fractional shift. It placed the leading edge of his primaries just behind her shoulder blade. Not touching. Present. A statement visible to every Galeborn in the chamber. This human is under my wing. He did it without asking permission. Miremba did not flinch. The matron captain will want a formal rotation schedule for the research station, Kyrus said. Stormcry's contribution will include 3 wind scouts and a senior nest architect. I have requested assignment to the station myself. You will get it, Miremba said. You just closed a debt cycle with Frost Hollow and saved a human diplomatic cutter. You can probably request anything you want for the next 6 months. That is not why I requested it. She turned to look at him. His crest was relaxed, the black feathers lying flat against his skull. His nictitating membrane swept once, twice, and retracted. His eyes were clear and bright and fixed on her face. Why did you request it? She asked. Because I want to understand what your species does, he said. Not the technology, not the fold drives or the shield harmonics. What you did in the chamber. When Valath demanded your schematics and you refused. When the shield wall needed a ship to hold position and you countermanded your own captain. When the matron captain offered co-leadership and you accepted without waiting for permission from your superiors. He preened the feather behind his ear. I want to understand how you do that. Cooperation, she said. That is the word. We cooperate. We find people willing to trust one another. We build something. Then we show it to everyone else and say, this works. See? This works. That is not what I observed. Kyrus's crest lifted slightly. You did not cooperate. You stepped forward alone each time and made yourself the fulcrum. That is not the same thing as cooperation. Maybe not. You placed yourself between forces destined to destroy each other. You did it without armor, without weapons, without any leverage except your own willingness to be the point of contact. He paused. My people do not do this. We understand contracts. We understand obligation and debt and honor. We do not understand why someone would make themselves vulnerable for the sake of strangers. Miremba looked at her hands again. The left one was still calm. The tremor was gone for now. She did not know if it would return. She knew it did not matter. The tremor was not the point. The point was what she had done while the hand still shook. We have a word for it, she said, in one of our old languages, Ubuntu. It means, she stopped. The translation was not simple. It never had been. It means, I am because you are. My humanity is bound up in yours. What I do to you, I do to myself. Kyrus was silent for a long moment. His crest lay flat again. His nictitating membrane swept twice across his eyes. That is not in our predictive models, he said. I know, Miremba said. It will be. The heater hummed. The chemical lanterns burned steady. Outside the chamber, somewhere in the warren of tunnels threading the asteroid, a Stormcry work crew was beginning the long process of repairing damage from the dimensional breach. The sound of their equipment drifted through the rock, a distant, rhythmic tapping, like a heartbeat conducted through stone. Lumen phase shift pulsed again. The translator in Miremba's earpiece rendered the question a half-second after the light resolved into a steady, questioning blue. May we visit your home system? Miremba blinked. The question was so unexpected, so utterly outside the scope of anything she had prepared for, that she felt her composure slip for a fraction of a second. The crystal's gas cloud swirled in its lattice, patient, curious, waiting. She opened her mouth to answer. Yes, she said.